This is Rob Sedigatpour from Stratco Property Solutions, here with my partner from B6 Real Estate Advisors, Mitch Flaherty. He wanted to invite you to the December 2021 update state of the 421 tax incentive market. Today we have our guest, Mr. Daniel Bernstein from Rosenberg Estis, to share with us insights on proposed changes in the state of the market. Mitch, if you can initiate the conversation.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rob, and thank you, Daniel, for joining us today. So the first question I had is, appreciate this is a difficult question to answer, but do we have any indication of when the timing of the 420 will be renewed next year?
Right. So thanks for having me. The 421A statute requires commencement by June 15th of 2022. We expect this will be a major subject of the discussion in the New York State legislative session that's supposed to run through June of 22. It's also the time when there'll be a primary election for governor. There's a lot of different ways this could go, but there is, I've heard, certainly a different political calculus to this than when 421A was renewed and extended the last time. But there are still reasons to think that it might be extended with revisions. It's what I'm peering into the future and forecasting, subject to the will of the legislators.
Yeah, that leads on to my next question in terms of how do you anticipate the 420A will look like? You know, many conversations I'm having with developers is they expect a change in the AMI bands to be less favorable to developers, let's say.
I think that's entirely possible. 6 years ago, the 421A program required 20% of the units affordable at 60% of AMI in the geographic exclusion area. Now there are higher AMI bands. I think it's entirely possible that an extension with revisions would see a higher percentage of units at lower AMI bands than they presently are. Maybe it's bringing back closer to what it was 6 years ago in some respects, but I think there are a number of changes that could happen, including the AMI bands.
Okay. What can we learn about sort of the 2015, 2017, 21 420A renewals, and what can we learn about the past can help us look into this renewal?
Sure. We can learn that when there are major changes to the program that require the consent of parties other than the legislators, that can slow the process down. In 2015, 421A was extended, but its extension's implementation was made contingent on the agreement between the construction trades and the real estate board on construction wage requirements. Those parties couldn't come to an agreement for about 16 months, and so it wasn't until about April of 2017 that the 421A program that we currently have was finalized and implemented. If it's left to the legislators, I think it's entirely possible that whatever happens will happen by the end of the legislative session or soon after. I think introducing other parties into the discussion certainly caused that delay in the outcome of 421 previously.
Okay, so what does a project need to have to do in order to grandfather into the 420A? My understanding was there needs to be a footprint in the ground.
Right. For new construction projects, ground up new construction, they need to achieve a commencement date, which is the date on which the initial excavation and construction of footings and foundations occurs lawfully in good faith. That's how the statute reads. In practice, that means start installing your first footing or foundation element pursuant to a permit that will allow you to do that. Typically a foundation and a building permit. In some cases, perhaps another permit, but do all that and do that by June 15th and document, because the application for 421A can't be filed until the building's TCO'd or CO'd. Yeah. So you really need to have that proof of commencement nailed down and tucked away for the time you might need it a couple of years later.
Okay. How does the 421A interact with other regulatory agreements like example, in the Bronx, you've got Drome Avenue, where there's a lot of MIH, mandatory inclusionary housing zoning. So
Sure.
how do they correlate and support each other?
Well, where there's mandatory inclusionary housing, MIH, voluntary inclusionary housing, or certain subsidy agreements or certain other regulatory agreements, they all get layered on top. And the way this gets implemented is that the more restrictive requirements apply. MIH was designed to have certain MIH options that correlate pretty well to the current 421A program in terms of affordability. Most developers wouldn't agree to build permanently affordable housing under MIH unless they were also getting a property tax exemption such as 421A with it. So it helps that the programs are synchronized so that the same units do double duty, right? Satisfy the zoning requirements and qualify for the tax exemption. That's how it was intended. That's how it's been largely working to date.
Mitch, I have a question for Dan. How would you monetize the possible differences in the upcoming 421A revision with the current as far as the potential change in economics for the developer?
Right. I would expect that any future version of 421A we're likely to see will be more restrictive, produce a lower rate of return for a developer than the current program. So what we are doing with our clients and with the real estate community, the conversations we're having are about vesting for the current program. We really don't know what will exist after June 15th of next year. It's up to the legislature, but I don't know anyone who's optimistic that it'll be equivalent for a developer. Everyone expects it will be a worse situation. So the starting point is vesting for the current program. Beyond that, there's a lot of questions.
Okay, last two questions, and then we're going to wrap up. So if a project doesn't vest correctly by June 15th, it's going to roll into the new program, correct?
It's going to roll into whatever happens after June 15th. It rolls into a question mark.
Okay, got it. And then what can purchasers and lenders of 421A development sites do or need to do on their diligence on a purchase or a loan agreement?
Right. So the most important thing to know is that a property that's intending to qualify for the 421A exemption, and there's a completion date requirement, June 15th, 26. There's all the different eligibility requirements, including affordability we touched on briefly. But for right now, the lender or the purchaser needs to know that that project has vested for 421A, has achieved a commencement date by June 15th of 22, because absent some legislative extension, that's the deadline. That's when projects ground up new construction has to get in the ground and put a first footing in lawfully in good faith. So lenders and purchasers keep that in mind.
Just to add to quick comments, Dan, on my side, I think going into the new year, you won't see any transactions in the outer boroughs for land because they need the 421A in order to make the project work. And there's just not enough time for them to get their footings in the ground and the building permits, etc. So I think there's going to be a real slowdown in the land sales market in the boroughs.
Dan, thank you very much for joining us today. If there's any questions or if people would like to reach out to Dan, we'll share his contact info at the conclusion of this webinar, and look forward to the next series in January.
All right. Nice talking with you, fellas.
Thank you.